All right, so I'm here with Tommy. Today we're going to talk about some taxpayer MLE free agents that the Lakers can look at. We are going to act like LeBron is not going to take a pay cut and will just opt into his $53.6 million contract for next season. And if that's the case, the Lakers will only be left with the $5.6 million taxpayer MLE this year. They actually had this same taxpayer MLE last year, but didn't spend it on anyone because they had no open roster spots. This year, they should have more than a couple of open roster spots. And something to keep in mind, the amount of the veteran minimum this upcoming season for a player with 7+ years experience will already be at like $3 million. So that's not much less than the $5.6 million taxpayer MLE. So just keep that in mind. Hopefully, the Luka factor and playing with someone who can bolster your averages and suck in the defense will be enticing to some players. But yeah, for this particular segment, we are only going to talk about non-bigs, non-centers, since I think the Lakers' best avenue at getting a starting caliber center is via trade and not the free agency market. And there's not much you can do with $5.6 million anyways. Um, and yeah, the Lakers will likely get better bang for their buck looking at another position of need with the taxpayer MLE. So which guards slash wings slash forwards on the free agent market are we interested in signing with that $5.6 million? Before I start listing out some of my preferred names, Tommy, do you have a name in mind that you've highlighted?
So it's obviously tough because we just don't know like who's going to be available, who's going to be available at what price, like what
Yeah.
what trades we make, and I don't know. We can go on and on. To your point, I do think that the better utilization of the taxpayer MLE is going to be a center. But thinking about guards, most of the guards that I would want that I think would be good difference makers are going to be out of our range. I'm thinking about guys like, I think a guy like Nikhil Alexander Walker, Matisse Thybulle if he opts out, Bruce Brown. Those guys are more like full MLE type guys, I think. So
Mhm.
you're sort of looking more bargain players. I mean, the only guy I could really think of who well, maybe one of a small handful of guys who I think could be helpful at that taxpayer MLE price point is somebody like a Gary Trent Jr. I mean, I would want to look
Mhm.
at the analytics, I think, a little bit more to see how much his defense has fallen off. But Gary Trent Jr. can obviously hit a shot. He's a veteran. Taxpayer MLE would be double what he made this year. So it's like an increase over his veteran minimum. He can play both sides of the court. Again, I don't know what his impact numbers look like defensively at this stage. Uh, but somebody sort of in that mold.
Yeah, so Gary Trent Jr. this season with the Bucks, he averaged 11 points, 41% from 3, hitting 2.4 a game, which is still good. But in the playoffs, he had two spectacular games where he scored 33 points and 37 points, hitting 8 of 17 from 3 and 9 of 12 from 3 respectively. So there's going to be some recency bias with Gary Trent for sure, but it's crazy that last season Gary Trent was coming off of an $18 million player option with the Raptors that he took, which he probably shouldn't have taken and just got in a new extension the previous season. But because he took that player option, he didn't end up reaching an extension agreement with Toronto this past summer, got pinched out by the market, and ended up just signing for the minimum. Now he's probably going to want to try and recoup some of his losses, but yeah, once you get that minimum veteran minimum kind of contract next to your name, it's kind of hard for teams to look past that. So I do think Gary Trent, if we can get him for the taxpayer Emily, would be a huge steal. He's only 26 years old, which is kind of crazy. You know for sure he can knock it down from three, but to your point, how much has his defense fallen off? But I don't think it's fallen off enough to the point where Milwaukee had to bench him in the playoffs. You know, he was playing, I think he was starting for them actually. Some of that is due to injury with Damian Lillard. But yeah, to your point, Gary Trent would be a great name for the taxpayer MLE. Now, let me get into some other names. And for this first part, I'm going to talk about some veteran names. You mentioned some names that you don't think will be taxpayer MLE guys, but I'll just bring them to the surface again just to make sure that, let's say that you can get Bruce Brown for the taxpayer MLE, Tommy, because Bruce Brown has kind of made his hay the last 2 years, and some would say he probably didn't deserve a $20 million contract. But if we can get Bruce Brown for $5.6 million, because he's already made $20 million the last 2 seasons, he's only 28 years old. This season, in a combined 41 games between Toronto and New Orleans, in 12 starts, he averaged 11 points, 4.6 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 47% from the field, 44% from three, 11 of 25 from three, which is pretty good. That's just 12 starts. The rest of the year, he was kind of injured. But if we can get Bruce Brown for the Taxpayer MLE, would you be down for that?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, easy. Um, What about this one's trickier because this player has a player option of about $8 million this upcoming season. And so he's likely not going to opt out of that to take something less. But let's say he makes that mistake and doesn't assess the market properly and is like, I'm not going to take my player option. And then he gets pinched out. What would you say to Kelly Oubre, 29 years old, averaged 15.6 rebounds, 1.5 steals last season for the Sixers, 47% from the field, 29% from three, which isn't great, but Kelly Oubre is kind of like an up and down Kyle Kuzma like volume 3 point shooter. And the thing I like about Kelly Oubre is just that he's long and athletic and he rebounds the ball, he can score. He's kind of like that rangy wing that you kind of want next to Luka Doncic. What are your thoughts on Kelly Oubre for the Taxpayer MLE with a lot of if caveats attached to it?
Kelly Oubre, he's a tricky one because he's just like so. It feels like every year I'm like, oh yeah, every other year I go back and forth on Kelly Oubre. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, he'd be a great ad, and then he has a really bad year, and then and then he like has a bounce back year, and then I'm like, okay, he's back, and then he has a bad year again. So I don't know. He's like always up and down. His shot is inconsistent. I think like the critique on him is he can get a little space cadetty, but I don't know. He's a solid player. He's a veteran. I mean, for the taxpayer MLE, as you mentioned earlier, it's not that much over a veteran minimum. So he fits an archetype that we need. I would probably take him.
Yeah, me too. I think Kelly Oubre can be like the wingier version of Rui Hachimura because I kind of want to start getting guys, Tommy, that are more literal two-way players because I think we're starting to over-index on like defensive specialists who can't really do anything else. Where I would like to get someone moldable in the form of Rui, who isn't necessarily like for sure he's a defensive specialist, but you can kind of hone him and harness him into one. And Kelly Oubre in the Sixers competitive years has proven that he can get grimy and dirty and do all of the garbage man type things, especially because he has like 6'7" with a 7 foot wingspan. And he can score 15 points, right? Now, one name that is very, very realistic that I think we can get for the taxpayer Emily, I have been hammering his name over your head multiple times. But what would your thoughts be on signing the Rockets' Jay Sean Tate, who's still only 29 years old? He obviously didn't play that much for the Houston Rockets this season, mainly because Houston has a plethora of his type of defensive archetype. When he did play 20 plus minutes this season for the Rockets due to a variety of injuries, he averaged 8 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal on 56%, 42% shooting splits. He's never going to be a highly efficient volume 3 point shooter, but he can knock it down in a pinch. And this is the former Rising Stars sophomore player, or maybe even rookie. I forget which Rising Stars game he was in, maybe both years. But Jay Sean Tate is a guy who has that pedigree coming out of the draft, even though I think he was an undrafted player. Anyways, what would your thoughts be on signing Jay Sean Tate for the taxpayer MLE?
Jay Sean Tate, I do like. And he's like one of these where I think, one of these types of guys where if you hit on you could really hit on a signing like this. And then like he ends up just being like people are going to ask later, how the hell did we get this guy for the
Yep.
tax? You know what I mean? So there's definitely that high upside. I think the concern is, he put up the numbers with Houston when he got the opportunity. He didn't get a lot of opportunity over an 82 game season. Can he do it? I think he can, but when you have so few resources, I think it's also reasonable, for a team to take the perspective of like, well, we have to take a more proven commodity because this is our one spending chip. So that's sort of where I stand on Tate.
Yeah, I get that, but I think he's actually proven it. Like his first 2 years with Houston, he was like 12 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists. He kind of showed off his entire versatility. So honestly, his problem is just that he's the forgotten man on a team full of athletic wings, you know? So if somebody can identify that, I feel like they could get a real steal in Jay Sean Tate because, to my point, he's been a forgotten man, and that's kind of the biggest knock on him. So I don't think he has any problem sort of snapping back into the versatile player he once was if he just gets the reps, because it's not like he's a 34-year-old player, you know, like 34 is not even that old, but he's still only 29. So Jay Sean Tate, I would absolutely love because he is that bully ball defender who can literally play positions 1 through 4. Like the Rockets have played him at power forward before just because he's such a versatile defender. So Jay Sean Tate, Taxpayer MLE, let's go. Maybe we even get him for the veteran minimum, at which point that would be a huge steal. Okay, Tommy, I really quickly want to add a couple of like younger names to the list here. These are younger, less established names. So I'll get your quick thoughts on them after we take it to break. All right, so we are back. Tommy, I'm going to list out 3 younger, less established names, and I want you to give me your thoughts on them. Um, you already mentioned one of them at the top. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is one of them. He's only 26 years old. I think there's a slight chance that he could be had for the taxpayer MLE. I'm not exactly sure what Minnesota's books look like. I'm guessing, you know, they would probably just pay him that if he wanted it. But let's say Nickeil Alexander-Walker can be had for the taxpayer MLE. I want to add to this list of younger players Zaire Williams, 23 years old, out of the Brooklyn Nets. He's going to be a restricted free agent this season, but the Brooklyn Nets may have other plans. They might want to go out for some bigger fish, et cetera, et cetera. Zaire Williams, 23 years old. He averaged 10 points, 4.6 rebounds, 1 steal on 41%, 34% splits, hitting 1.6 threes a game this season. Really started to find himself in the second half of the season with the Nets when he got more opportunity with DFS out of the way. 6'9" with a 6'10" wingspan. And then, okay, this one I know is a super pipe dream, but I'm going to add Jonathan Kuminga to this list.
Oh,
um, Jonathan Kuminga, 22 years old, 6'7" with a 7-foot wingspan. This season, 15 points, 4.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 30% from three, hitting 1 a game. He's a career 33% three-point shooter on low volume. I don't think he'll ever be a highly efficient, high volume three-point shooter, but given his physical mold and athleticism, there's obviously a lot to work with there. And I asterisk Jonathan Kuminga because in order for us to get him, he would obviously just have to he might just want to be on a revenge tour this upcoming season and might just want to pick the best place where he can sort of shine. And maybe for Jonathan Kuminga, it's like, yeah, let me play next to Luka Doncic, but that might be totally off with regards to his mindset. Just go along with the theory here that all of these guys are willing to take the taxpayer MLE to play next to Luka Doncic. So Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Zaire Williams, Jonathan Kuminga. Who do you like? Do you like all of them? If you do, how would you rank it?
so I like all of them.
Nice.
And I don't think we can get at least 2 of them. But I think like the way I would think about that trio is I like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, I think could start next to Luca. The Timberwolves have a lot of, I mean, it is like Stu Land said this on a couple of the games, but it's almost like when they went from McDaniels to Nickeil Alexander-Walker defensively with the amount of, I mean, obviously McDaniels is a much, because of his measurables, is just a better Luka defender, but it feels like they didn't really lose that much on the few times that McDaniels got into foul trouble and Nickeil Alexander-Walker comes in. He does like different things than McDaniels, but he's long, he's good size for a guard. He can dribble the ball a little bit. He can shoot very well. He had a down shooting series against us, but he was over 40% from three on the year. You know, I just think he's a really, really obviously good fit in the backcourt, and he can defend at the point of attack very well, as we saw.
Mhm.
I would have him up there. Obviously, Kaminga. I think that's pretty pipe dreamy. Also because, like, you know, ignoring the fact that the money probably doesn't make sense. Like he would want a sure like if we didn't have LeBron, maybe we would have a better chance of getting Kaminga. Like he
That's
would
true.
want to be like Luca's starting four, getting those types of guaranteed looks next to Luca. Um, Zaire Williams, I think we actually could. I don't know what his market is going to look like, but he has flown a little bit under the radar. He's sort of like a Minnesota Timberwolves guy that didn't get hyped this year because he didn't play on the Timberwolves. Like he plays like those guys. The couple of games we played against Brooklyn, he was picking up full court. Extremely, extremely aggressive on ball defense. He does foul a little bit, but that could be cleaned up. Super athletic. Yeah, I mean, he checks so many boxes. He would be at the top of my list. I don't know if, or among the top of my list if he was actually available. But yeah, I like all three of those guys.
Yeah, I've described Zaire Williams in the past as like the next Nickeil Alexander Walker before he becomes Nickeil Alexander Walker, you know?
Yeah.
And what's crazy about Zaire Williams is he's like 3 or 4 inches taller than Nickeil Alexander Walker. He's like 6'9", which is crazy. But yeah, I would have it probably Zaire Williams because of the age, athleticism factor, and just sheer length. Nickeil Alexander Walker for sure as well. I just knock him down a peg because he's 6'5" and a limited shot creator, although he did shoot 38% from three this year, hitting 1.7 a game, 39% from three last year, hitting 1.6 a game. So I feel like he's really shored up his perimeter shooting. And to your point, he is just pesky as all hell perimeter defender who really harasses people with his lanky limbs and arms and stuff. So yeah, so these are probably all pipe dream names, but if I'm the Lakers, I would heavily look at them. Another young guy that I would look at if the Utah Jazz decide to kind of get off of him because he's on a non-guaranteed contract for this upcoming year would be Kenyon Martin Jr., a name that we've talked about in the past. We just need more athleticism and explosiveness from the wing position, Tommy. Someone who can run up and down, get boards, and just inject us with some life in on that end of the court. So Kenyon Martin Jr. would be another name to look out for. And before we close this episode, there is one veteran that I forgot to get your thoughts about that I think would actually be pretty realistic in the same vein as Jay Sean Tate. And what are your thoughts on Karis LeVert, 30 years old? He was traded from the Cleveland Cavaliers to the Atlanta Hawks. With Cleveland, he averaged 10 points, 3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 1 steal, 45%, 40% splits, which is pretty good for a bench player. And then with the Atlanta Hawks, he scored 15 points, 6 assists, 7 rebounds in the Hawks play-in game versus the Heat, 7 points, 6 rebounds in their blowout loss to Orlando. I mean, Karis LeVert has always kind of been an up and down offensive player, a little bit erratic, but he can kind of do a little bit of everything. And then because of his length, wingspan, he's always been a great steals rate sort of guy. He's also just like a rangy defender as well. So imagine like Nickeil Alexander Walker, but with the ability to play make in a pinch and run pick and roll for you, you know? So what are your thoughts on 30-year-old Karis LeVert? I do think he may end up getting like the full MLE or maybe Atlanta even resigns him, but he could be a guy that kind of gets pinched out by the market.
Full MLE does make sense to me for a guy like Karis LeVert, but maybe I'm just biased because that's like roughly the range he's been in for the last several years. I think it would even be like a slight pay cut. But
Yeah.
I think Karis LeVert is somebody I think I mentioned to you is especially if we end up trading Austin, and in some sort of deal, like let's say there's a starting caliber center. The only way we can make it work is if we have to trade one of Austin or Rui, and it's like Austin ends up being the odd man out. I, in that scenario, Karis LeVert, I think, would be really good. Even if we don't end up in that scenario, I think he'd be pretty good. I think
Mm-hmm.
the issue, the only issue that I have with him, as opposed to other guys who are similarly priced, is he's he's sort of redundant with Luca in ways that we wouldn't want if we got rid of Austin, in my opinion. Because if you're getting Karis LeVert, I think like I guess what I'm trying to say is Austin, I think we can live. We already have him. He's getting paid $12 million. I think you can live with some inefficiencies with Luca. If you're going out and getting a new guy, I don't know that you would want to get like another Austin, right? You would really want to solidify that position with a guy who wants to catch and shoot. He can play, create a little bit, but he really wants to catch and shoot and defend. And Karis LeVert can defend. He can shoot a little bit, but you're sort of losing some of his value if you're not putting the ball in his hands and letting him
Mm.
play make a little bit as like an off ball guy. And maybe that just ends up being like the Austin replacement, and that's fine. But obviously, if he's available for like the smaller MLE, you take that all day and night. But in my head, I'm thinking more like of somehow we unlock the full MLE, or he becomes available in a sign and trade, or something like that. Um, I think it would be more, I think, contextual on based on how the rest of our roster looks at that time.
Yeah, those are fair points. I think what I like about Karras is that he's actually in the last year or so transitioned into that six man off the bench role. And it seems like he's perfectly fine with playing that role and not having all of those reps. So under that context and lens, even with Austin on the team, because I think Karis LeVert, because of his ranginess defensively, can kind of cover for both Austin and Luka while also giving us secondary ball handling, So I would definitely take Karras if he's willing to take the $5.6 million exception. I don't think he will be, and I think he was important even to the Hawks end of season run. So they'll probably just resign him. But it's an interesting, name to throw out there. I think ideally, if a guy like Quentin Grimes hadn't blown up on the Sixers, he would probably be, Tommy, like the ideal player
Yeah.
that you were just talking about, like the catch and shoot guy who will just hustle. But he kind of blew up with the Sixers, and that guy is definitely either getting re signed by the Sixers or getting a full MLE somewhere. And it's ironic that he was literally playing with Luka Doncic in that sort of role. But yeah, we have lots more to talk about with regards to the taxpayer MLE, off-season free agency. Maybe we'll delve into some of the names that we talked about in this episode in further detail in future episodes. But this is sort of just like a palate teaser with regards to the lower MLE. We'll see what happens if LeBron takes a pay cut, if he doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. If we free up some roster spots with a consolidation trade. Lots to get into as the offseason progresses. But with that said, that'll do it for our initial non-bigs, non-centers, early look at the taxpayer MLE free agent market. Follow us on Twitter /X at Lakers Legacy Pod. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel of the same name. And Tommy, I will catch you next time. Catch you later next time. I don't even know how to sign off anymore.
Peace.
Laters.